What's happening everyone, my name is Alex and welcome back. For this camera comparison we have the brand new iPhone 14 and of course the iPhone 14 Pro. Out of the two, obviously the iPhone 14 Pro is more expensive. So in today's video I want to see how much better the cameras on the iPhone 14 Pro are compared to the cameras that we have on the iPhone 14. Of course, with the iPhone 14 Pro we do have an extra camera on the back, and we also have a larger sensor for the main camera on the back. So we'll see if that actually makes a difference for pictures and videos. For this recording I'm doing 4K at 30 frames per second. Of course, both devices can do 4K at 60 frames per second with the front-facing camera, and they both have stabilization at all resolutions. So I'm just gonna walk a bit faster just so you can see how that stabilization works. And looking at the screens here, there is a massive difference for the screen brightness. I can't believe how bright the screen on the iPhone 14 Pro is. Alright, so with that being said, let's start by checking out some portrait mode pictures that I took with both devices and we'll move on from there. Alright, so we are looking at portrait mode pictures. Now, the pictures taken by the iPhone 14 Pro have an iPhone 13 vibe, if that makes any sense. So the colors aren't as saturated and they don't use that much contrast as they do in the pictures taken by the iPhone 14. So for me personally, I prefer every single picture that I took with the iPhone 14 Pro over the iPhone 14. The pictures from the 14 Pro just look a bit more natural in my opinion. But what do you guys think? Do you prefer the portrait mode pictures from the 14 or the 14 Pro? Definitely leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to press that like button as well. Okay, next we are moving on and checking out some 2x zoom pictures that I took with both devices. Now, the iPhone 14 Pro has a larger sensor. So according to Apple, they can do 2x zoom without losing any quality. Well, if you look at those pictures, there isn't really that big of a difference between the pictures that I took with the iPhone 14 and the 14 Pro. So they kind of look the same to me. But I mean, if you see something else that I'm not seeing, definitely let me know. As for 5x zoom pictures, of course, with the iPhone 14 Pro, we also have the third lens, that's a telephoto lens. So for 5x zoom pictures, the iPhone 14 Pro will do better, but I was quite impressed by the picture quality that I got from the 14 as well. Alright, and we are moving on to some ultra-wide pictures. Well, the first thing I've noticed here is the fact that the pictures from the iPhone 14 Pro aren't as saturated as the pictures that we get with the iPhone 14. And I'm using both phones on the same vibrant mode. So the pictures from the 14 Pro are definitely less saturated, and once again they use way less contrast in the pictures taken by the 14 Pro, making those pictures look a bit brighter. I've also noticed the dynamic range in the pictures taken by the 14 Pro is a bit better. So once again, for that ultra-wide camera, I feel that the iPhone 14 Pro does better than the regular iPhone 14. And we're moving on to pictures they took with the main cameras. And once again, all the pictures are taken on auto mode and maybe about a second apart from each other. The first thing I've noticed here is the fact that the iPhone 14 Pro has the wider field of view for that main camera. So you can definitely see a bit more in those pictures taken by the iPhone 14 Pro because, well, the lens seems to be wider. Now, the same kind of applies as we've seen for the ultra-wide cameras. So the pictures aren't as saturated, the colors aren't as saturated, and they don't use that much sharpening, that much contrast in those pictures. So once again, all the pictures taken by the iPhone 14 look a bit brighter because of that. And also dynamic range in those pictures is better. So this year, yes, there is a difference between the iPhone 14 Pro when compared to the iPhone 14. Something that we haven't actually seen last year with the iPhone 13 and the 13 Pro. But what do you guys think about those daytime pictures? Alright, next we are gonna move on and check out some pictures that I took at night. Of course, we are starting with the main cameras, and for most of those pictures that you are seeing right now, the night mode was used. I think there are a couple of pictures where it wasn't dark enough and the phones didn't actually use that night mode, but for all the other pictures, the night mode was used. Now here once again I'm seeing a difference. If you look close enough at those pictures, you're gonna notice that most pictures taken by the iPhone 14 Pro are a bit sharper. Now, there isn't that crazy of a difference, so just a slight difference. So the pictures do seem a bit sharper, and some of them are also a bit brighter. Again, it's not that big of a difference, not that big as Apple made it seem in that presentation they had, but I can definitely see a difference, and the picture quality is improved from the iPhone 14 Pro. And moving on to pictures that I took with the ultra-wide cameras, and once again the night mode, well, here I can see an even bigger difference for the picture quality. So many of those pictures that I took with the iPhone 14, well, they don't look that sharp. Well, they seem much sharper from the iPhone 14 Pro, and also slightly brighter. So once again, it seems that we have a difference for the main camera and for the ultra-wide camera whenever you're using the night mode on these two devices. Alright, and next we're gonna move on and check out some sample videos that I took with both devices. Now, the main differences that you're gonna notice here are for the 2x zoom pictures. Of course, with the iPhone 14 Pro, we also have the action mode available. That's not something that we have on the regular iPhone 14. So if you're running, if you're doing some more crazy movements, you're gonna get smoother looking footage or more stabilized looking footage from the 14 Pro. And I do have an example in there. And I've also noticed a difference for some nighttime recordings. So I'll let you guys watch those sample videos and definitely leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Okay, so we are gonna start with a bit of a recording with the main cameras done in 4K at 30 frames per second. Now here I personally don't think we're gonna see any difference for video quality, but I guess we'll have to see how this footage looks on the computer. So we're gonna walk this way. We'll see how the stabilization works on both of them. I can actually run as well for a bit. We'll stop here. We're gonna pan right, so kind of towards the sun, and we'll walk this way for a bit. And it's getting windy, so you're gonna hear some of that wind in the recording for sure. So yeah, this is how recording done with the main cameras in 4K at 30 frames per second between the iPhone 14 Pro and of course the iPhone 14 would look like. Alright, so the next recording is done with the action mode turned on the iPhone 14 Pro and the main camera and 4K at 30 frames per second on the iPhone 14. Now the resolution for the 14 Pro whenever you're using the action mode is 2.8K at 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second. We are currently doing 2.8K and 30 frames per second, and I'm gonna go running just so you can see how good this is. So let's see. So this feature is only available on the 14 Pro, not the 14. So yeah, this is how the action mode works. I also wanted to show you how a recording would look like if you are using the main camera, recording in 4K at 30 frames per second, and you do 2x zoom on both devices, so the 14 and the 14 Pro. I'm actually curious to see how this looks later on when I get home. So we'll pan left this way. I'm gonna walk for a bit. So 2x zoom with the main cameras basically. Since we have that larger sensor on the iPhone 14 Pro, this should look much better, but again, we'll have to see later on when I get home. And I'm gonna pan up. So yeah, 4K at 30 frames per second with the main cameras and 2x zoom. And since I'm here anyways, I might as well show you how a recording would look like if you're using the ultra-wide cameras on the back of the two devices, and once again recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. Keep in mind that you can also do 4K at 60 frames per second with both lenses on the back of the 14 and all three lenses on the back of the 14 Pro. So ultra wide and 4K at 30 frames per second. And I cannot believe how much brighter the screen on the iPhone 14 Pro is compared to the iPhone 14. I have not seen a screen this bright on anything before. Alright, we have a quick recording in low light between the iPhone 14 and of course the iPhone 14 Pro. For this recording we are doing 4K at 30 frames per second and recording using the main cameras on the back of the two devices. Just gonna walk this way. It is a bit windy, so you may hear some wind aside from my voice. And I think we're gonna stop somewhere around here. I'm gonna pan left slowly. And keep going. So yeah, this is how a recording done with the main cameras on the back of these two devices would look like in low light. Moving on to our second recording in low light. For this recording I'm using the ultra wide cameras on the back of the two devices and once again recording in 4K at 30 frames per second. So I'm just gonna get around here. We have a bit of light on the street, so it's not total darkness. So I guess I can walk this way for a bit. So yeah, ultra wide cameras, 4K at 30 frames per second. So me personally, I would be happy with the video recordings from the 14 or the 14 Pro. Well, the other way around, the 14 and the 14 Pro. They both do quite good for video recordings. Okay, next we are gonna move on and check out some selfies, and of course we are starting with some daytime selfies. And here, if you look at those pictures, once again you're gonna notice that the iPhone 14 is using more saturated colors for those pictures. So it kind of changes the color of my skin. I'm not a big fan of that. So yes, I do prefer the daytime selfies that I took with the iPhone 14 Pro. As for the nighttime selfies, realistically neither device does that great because there is a lot of noise in those pictures, and if I would have to choose one, I don't know, maybe the 14 does a bit better, I'm not sure. But realistically neither device does good for nighttime selfies. So there you have it, the iPhone 14 Pro and the iPhone 14. This is in fact the first year when there is such a big difference between these two devices. It's really not worth buying the iPhone 14 anymore because, well, the picture quality is lower than the picture quality that we get from this one and so on. Plus we get more cameras on this one, more features and so on. Alright guys, hopefully this video was useful. Thanks for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one.